So for those coming onto the recording, we're talking about discernment today. I consider it to be one of the most important subjects for Christians to learn about, dive deep into this subject because it's critical. Jesus warns us in Matthew 7 verses 21 to 23 that there will be great deception. He says, many will say to me, Lord, Lord, have you not performed signs, wonders, miracles in your name? And his answer to them is, depart from me, for I never knew you. Now, that was a wake-up call for me, because one day my journey led me into Easternism. I was well on the road to becoming a monk up in the Himalayas. I was born into a Christian family, grown up as a Christian family. Things didn't make sense to me. I started to become unhappy with the disconnect I was seeing in churches and so on. Anyhow, that led me off to a Hindu temple, and the bait or the hook that caught me in there was that when I went into the temple, there was a picture on the shrine of the guru, and right next to him was a picture of Jesus Christ. And I went and I said, wow, this is odd. And I went to him and I went to the guru. I said to him, what's your relationship with Jesus? And he quoted scripture to me. He says, all creation is put under the footstool of Jesus. We are ultimately subject to him. So that was my bait, and that got me in. But anyhow, because I was saying, well, maybe we're looking at the same coin from just different sides. So that got me in. And over 6 years, whilst I was with them, I was like happy as a pig in mud. But what I started to notice was the portrait of Jesus was every spring cleaning, it would be moved. And so it was moved from the shrine to the side wall, and then was moved down the wall, then further down, then out of the hall, then into the passage and further down. And eventually it ended up in the toilet and with the face to the wall behind the toilet. And when I looked at this, I said, no, something is wrong here. Something is wrong. Anyhow, long story short, I had a Damascus Road experience with the Lord, had a confrontation, and where he said to me, and he called me out of that, he says, listen, all religions have truth in them, but I alone paid the price for you. There is no other religion in which there is a sacrifice that I have given. Now you make up your mind. And I was on my bed, crippled for 10 days. I said, I accept you, Lord, and stood up off the bed. I was instantly healed within 2 minutes. So that led me to, amongst other things, to the realization of how important it is to understand the subject of discernment, because we are warned again and again and again, watch out, you will be deceived. The warnings for the church, as I say, if you look for them, you'll see it throughout the New Testament. It's like a drum beat that goes throughout. So discernment is absolutely critical, and especially in this time. So with that in mind, let me share my screen and we'll dive into a presentation I've got for you. Here we are. We're going to be talking about spiritual discernment today. Very, very, very critically important. And one of the reasons it's so important is because when we are deceived, we don't know that we are deceived. The nature of deception is such that it presents itself to us as the truth. And this truth then says, look at me. It goes right back to Genesis, like the tree. I'm sorry, I'm just moving things on my screen so that I can still see what's going on in the screen and still have communication or eye contact with you. Anyhow, it goes back into Genesis. God says, there is the tree of life. I know what I'm doing. I've given you something which will give you life in abundance. Satan comes along and he says, yes, but let me offer you an alternative. And look at this alternative. Look how amazing it looks. And if you read there, you'll see in Genesis, it says, it was good for the eye, it was pleasing to look at, it was good for wisdom, good for knowledge, and to make you like God. So this is the nature of deception. God says it's this way, this is truth, this is life. And then deception comes with, wow, but look how good this thing that's going to deceive you, this thing that's going to take everything from you. But it doesn't come to you in the form of, let me give you something that's going to kill you. Let me give you something that's going to absolutely put you into hell and cause you to suffer. and so on. Deception invariably comes packaged in this wrapping of this is good for you. And so we need to learn how to discern. It's vitally important. In the world of discernment, or in the realm of discernment, we need to understand that we live in a world where deception is at an all-time high. Everything will be done to deceive you. The stakes are eternal. This is not a game. Remember when I was a pastor and an elder, I used to regularly say to the church, people, Christianity is not a game. The stakes are incredibly high. Jesus says, what will it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet you lose your soul? At the end of the day, it's only your soul that's going to stand in front of the Lord for judgment. Everything else is stripped away. Your soul is number one priority. Sarah, we started talking about the soul. Very, very critical subject, very important to understand. That is in Matthew 8:35 and 36. So you're here, we're in a time where there's talk of multiverse and multi-universes and so on. In this world of multiverses, we are being sold fakes and illusions as if they are reality. And there is this thing to move us. God has given us a reality, has given us a domain, has given us a place to live in. And we're now in this place where we have these universes. We are being told, right, move into these alternative universes. They are good for you. They are better for you. They are the answer. They are the future. These things are illusionary universes. We're in a world which is tangible. God has created that way. You can knock on wood, you can feel, you can test. But we're being sold as, wow, look at these illusions. Aren't they incredible? We live in bubbles that shape our perception so that we end up believing the bubbles are reality. And this is so important to understand this, because all of us, by the way, it's part of our human condition. All of us create bubbles of perception around us. And the thing with these bubbles is it's like mirrored walls, so that when you look at the wall, it reflects back at you your reality, but it actually reflects back at you who you are. And so if our mentality, our perception is closed down, it reflects back at us a closed down reality. And you see this again and again when you watch people having theological debates. I'm a Catholic. Well, I've created my Catholic Bible, and so everything I say bounces and echoes Catholicism back to me. I'm a Methodist. Well, I'm going to argue with a Catholic. Why? Because we are arguing within a Methodist bubble versus the Catholic bubble and so on. And the echo chambers we create in the process can't hear the other reality. And so we have to be very careful. We have to be discerning. Now, discernment, our nature and our ego says discernment begins with other people. I look at you, and I'm going to discern you. And how do I do that? I measure what's in my reality, my bubble reflecting back at me. And I say, but what you're telling me doesn't reflect from my bubble. It's not my bubble. Therefore, you must be wrong and I must be right. And that is the way we are very often taught in our seminaries and our Bible schools to logic and to reason through things and to judge and to evaluate others. And so there's a whole lot that comes out of that very complex subject. We could go into it much more, but that's another story for another day. So our reality seems completely real to us until it pops, until the walls come crashing down. Now, when deception is at play, deception will lead us along the road and keep us in that bubble, because it's got an investment that it's making. And I'll show you that as we go further. But when that bubble pops, it's when deception says, fine, it's in my interest to let it pop for you. And it plays these games with us, especially when it comes to that which is evil. I'll give you an example of some of the things that I'm talking about. And as we go into this, I'm really just touching on the surface of the subject today. It's such a profoundly important subject, has so many layers to it. So let me just give you an example. Money. Money used to be based on tangible value.
Gold.
I would bring you a tangible gift. I would bring you something that had actual value, something that had actual currency with it. For example, Roman soldiers were paid with salt. Now, why was that valuable? Well, because salt, if you wanted salt, you would have to go to great lengths to go and get salt. You can get an idea of how that works today. If you go to the Sahara Desert, you will see Bedouins who, in order to get salt, literally march 6 months out of the year to go and get salt, to bring it back to their village. They have 3 months rest, go through this process, but it is very arduous. So the Roman soldiers were paid in salt, from which we get the word salaris, or salary. Your salary is the salt that you're being paid for the work you give. Tangible value was in gold or in cattle or in silver. These things are bartered because money originally was the exchange of actual value. Then it was based on a receipt because gold was too heavy to carry in your pockets. So what you would do is you would take it to a bank, and a bank would issue you a receipt. Well, now that your gold is sitting in the bank, I can take my receipt and say, hey, Jason, or Heather or Stacy, let me do some work for you, and let's change our receipts. It's a whole lot easier than changing gold bars. And that's where printed currency came in. That's where printed money came in. So, but it still had value. Then came credit cards based on illusionary value. What happened with the gold was taken out of the banks, and the banks found out, well, since you're not actually asking for the gold, but you're asking for the receipts, well, let's just print more receipts and let's remove the gold. And so our currency has gone from actual value to paper value to illusionary value. So when you trade a credit card, you're not exchanging real value. What you're doing is exchanging electrons, exchanging a plus or a minus charge on an electron. And that's all it is. There's no substance. It's just an illusionary charge that's out there. Then came crypto and digital currency, and there is absolutely nothing there at all. It's quite incredible if you look at people, but what are they doing? They're literally pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into something that is literally non-existent. It's a stunning, stunning thing. So what has happened is that the whole world has been moved from trading reality to trading nothing at all. And we've been moved from this this concept of that which I give you has actual value to that which I give you is a superficial play and worthless. And it's an incredible thing that's happening. But it's important to discern a little bit further, because what has happened is that whatever takes place in the physical is a reflection of that which is taking place in the spiritual. Super important to understand that. Whatever takes place in the physical is a reflection of that which is taking place in the spiritual. If you can exchange reality for a fake, if you can exchange the real for the shadow, you can control everything. You can lie to people with impunity, and people will praise you for it. They will give you their money for it, and they will even sacrifice their lives for it. It's just profound when you begin to see how deep these things go. Give people shadows and tell them they have the truth, that the truth is the shadow, and they will forget the reality over time. That's exactly where we are today. How does deception work? So I'm going to show you something today. Let me just see if I can get some more space up here. So I'm going to show you something today, and I'm going to challenge you to give an illustration of how deception works. And if you get this, then I'm going to ask you to just be quiet so the others can work through this exercise with us. Deception works on the limitations of our being It basically understands what you want and what your desires are and plays into that. It then also plays into what you believe and what do you fear, and it uses misdirection. So this is basically how deception works. I'm going to give you an example of this. The deliberate crafting of presentations to deceive. This is part of it. So a lot of what we see in the world is deliberately crafted with a deliberate intention of deceiving. As an example, so in this example, you're all going to play a part in this. And my objective is to get you all to choose the same card. That's my objective. That's what we're going to do now. And I'm going to show you a set of 6 cards are displayed for 3 seconds. Your job is to choose one card and to remember the card you have chosen. So I'm going to give you 3 seconds to choose a card, remember the card you've chosen, and then what I will do is I'll reveal to you that you have all chosen the same card. Right? So here I am. I don't know what card you're going to choose, but I'm going to show you that you will all choose the same card. And I will set this up in that way. So here we go. Choose your card. 1, 2, 3, 4. Have you chosen your card? Okay. Remember the card you've chosen, and I'm going to prove to you that you've all chosen the same card, because I'm going to remove that card from the deck so that you can't find it. And your job then is to tell me if it is still there. So there is the deck, and tell me if you can find your card. If anybody can find your card, let me know.
It's gone.
It's gone, right? What I've done is I've removed the card that you chose from the deck. Anybody know how I did that?
All the cards are different.
Isn't that cool? Okay, so the question is, how could I possibly get all of you to choose the same card? And the answer is I didn't. And I think, Stacey, you picked that up.
Yep.
All I did is I created a misdirection to get you to believe what I wanted you to believe. And the truth can be revealed by comparing notes. So now, if we start saying, what card did you choose? So Stacey, what card did you choose?
The Jack of Hearts.
Jamon, you?
King of Spades.
Anybody choose something else?
I think I chose the King of Diamond.
Right. So now, if you start comparing the notes and we start putting together what happened, instead of removing one card, I simply replaced them all. Right? So there you have on the left, you have what I showed you in the first place. I put a challenge in front of you, choose a card, I misdirected you. And then what happened is I reveal a different set of cards, the ones you see on the right. And now you think, oh, wow, how is that possible? He took my card out, right? It's a misdirection. And this is what I refer to as the magician's trick. In the magician's trick, you capture the attention and then you misdirect the outcome. And this is happening on a massive scale, and it's happening all of the time. So we'll give you an example. In the housing market, you'll see the markets go through, they call it boom and bust, boom and bust. So in a booming market, you get the messages now being broadcast. You have the experts, everything on TV. Buy now before the prices are going up. This is a good time to buy. You've got to get in the market and the whole thing. Right? And then they start saying, why? Because the market is going up. And we start buying like crazy. Why? Because we fear and we want. We fear losing out and we want to get into the market so that we can gain. And then they switch the dialogue around, then they switch the rhetoric around. And they say, the markets are crashing. How will you survive? You know, this is terrible, terrible, terrible. And then what happens is the market prices go down. And you get into the gameplay because there's fear and what you want. You don't want to lose out and so on. And both of these are a misdirection. It's the magician's trick at exactly that. So what happens in the misdirection? Well, In the misdirection, whilst the masses were focusing on the fear of losing out, they were working for the resources to build the houses. That drives the market price up. Then it is only all taken away in the crash. In the previous crash, we had something like 22 million homes were lost to foreclosure. That's 22 families potentially that have worked. Their life salary went into it. Why? Who built the houses? Okay. They worked for the money to build the houses. Then it's all taken away. The market crashes. And in the process, in other words, the masses have been misdirected to transfer their hard-earned wealth to the super rich. And this is the magician's trick. Super rich know this, and they play the cycles, and they play the rhetoric. They put the rhetoric out into the market. And the rhetoric causes misdirection. And when the masses don't discern what is going on, they flow with the misdirection, just like the magician's trick. In other words, they work for it. It's you and I who put the money in the 8 hours a day to work hard, to save the money, to give it to the lender, to pay the mortgage, and so on. So this crowd works for it, whilst this guy gets it at the end of the day. This is the effect of not discerning. This is the outcome of not knowing and understanding what's really going on. Remember that the physical world reflects what is going on in the spiritual. When there's a lack of spiritual discernment, the physical world manifests the con and manifests the entrapment. When you are being told disaster is coming, you will die. And oh, we know what is good for you. Watch out, watch out, watch out, watch out. You are probably being lied to. You are probably being deceived. And the great thing about all of this is it's perfectly legal. The system is set up. When you lose your work, when you lose your life savings, when you lose everything, you go in front of the judge with tears in your eyes and your family is hungry, and the judge will say, well, let's have a look at the contracts. And you'll say, but this is perfectly legal. They did nothing wrong. Well, how does it work? They know what they're doing. The lawyers know how they're structuring these things. When you go into a bank and you sign a contract, you are signing a risk management document in which they are managing the risk because they know what they're doing. They know the risks and the odds are in their favor, but you sign it away so that when the whole thing crashes, like they know it's going to crash, because that's what cycles do. It's just a matter of time. They know it, but they're not going to tell you about it. And then when you lose everything and you're a victim of the crash, you go in front of the judge and he says, tough luck, it's perfectly legal, right? We have to wise up. We have this reflection from the spiritual into the physical all of the time. We are being taught in the physical, this is not a game. If you are deceived, the stakes are really high. And the same is true in the spiritual. If you are deceived, the stakes are super, super, super high. We have to take this very, very seriously. 2 Timothy 1 verses 7 says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of sound mind. When we look at what's coming at us out of the media, we need to start discerning, is this the spirit of fear or is this the spirit of sound mind? Is this the spirit of peace? Is this pushing me in the direction of fear or is this leading me in the direction of peace? Discernment begins not with other people, it begins with us. Jesus says to us that we need to test the spirits. Deuteronomy 3 verses 18 also says, it is God who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. Do not be fearful. Do not be dismayed. If you see and you hear this garbage being thrown at us all the time, what are they doing? It's misdirection. It's the magician's trick. Your attention is being pulled to focus onto this, whilst behind the scenes, your property, your house, everything is being taken away, and your soul at the same time. Be very careful. We have to become super discerning. 1 John 4 verses 1 says, beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, for many false prophets have gone out into the world. Discernment doesn't begin. We spend so much time and energy on finding fault with each other, whereas we have these gaping holes in our own discernment. We have the gaping holes in our own character and the flaws in our spiritual being that we are not discerning within each other. And discernment, and Jesus tells us, we have a log in our eye, whilst others have a splinter in theirs. And we're not even discerning that we have a log in our eye. Very important. And I wish there was more teaching on this. It is so vitally, critically important. Daniel 10 verses 12, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified of them. For the Lord your God goes with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Discernment also begins with a quality choice that we have to make for ourselves. And the choice is, when I hear, what am I going to let in my ears? What am I going to let in my heart? What am I going to give credibility to? Am I going to give credibility to God's word, who says, I will never leave you, forsake you? Am I going to give credibility to that? Am I going to let my thoughts be always above and not below, as we are instructed? Am I going to pray without ceasing? Or am I going to sit there with this little remote listening to sewage, spiritual sewage, pour into us day in and day out? When we do that, God does not share his throne with muck. God does not give pearls to swine. And so this is the temple of God. We have been given the temple of God. And if we are filling it hour by hour, day by day, minute by minute, with sewage, with spiritual sewage, do not expect that we are going to have the discernment when it is critical, because it will not happen. So discernment begins with ourselves. It begins with humility in front of the Lord. And it begins with an integrity that says, God, I will face the truth about these things.